7:45 p.m., October 23rd. The rain fell mercilessly over Manhattan, transforming the city into a glistening labyrinth of reflections. Not the gentle kiss of spring showers, but the cold, punishing downpour of autumn turning to winter, the kind that seeps through every layer that chills to the bone. On a dark green bench beneath the skeletal branches of a maple tree sat Masato Ishida. His silver hair, once impeccably styled that morning, now plastered against his scalp. His tailored Brioni suit, worth more than most New Yorkers' monthly rent, clung to his thin frame like a second skin, saturated and heavy. Water dripped from his aquiline nose, his strong chin, his weathered hands. Just 8 hours earlier, Masato had stood in the boardroom of Tech Summit Global's temporary New York headquarters, commanding the attention of 20 executives as he outlined the final details of a $2 billion development deal, a crown jewel that would cement his legacy. The pinnacle of a career that had taken him from a penniless engineer to one of the most powerful technology moguls in the world. Now he was invisible. New Yorkers streamed past him, a river of umbrellas and downturned faces. A young couple hurried by, sharing an umbrella in intimacy, briefly glancing at the old man before quickening their pace. A businessman in a $1,000 raincoat made a wide berth around the bench, his face a mask of discomfort and judgment. A police officer gave him a cursory glance, assuming another homeless elder, perhaps another victim of the merciless economy or mental health system. None of them saw Masato Ishida, CEO of Tech Summit Global, net worth $9 billion. They saw only what they expected to see: an old man, possibly homeless, definitely someone to avoid. The Patek Philippe Calatrava watch on his wrist, a timepiece worth $150,000, had stopped at 7:15 p.m. Masato stared at it, confused. The elegant, minute and hour hands refused to move. His vision blurred, doubled, then cleared again. He tried to check the time, but the numbers swam before his eyes, refusing to make sense. Something was very wrong. He remembered fragments, the searing headache that had struck him as he left the final meeting, the sudden weakness in his right side, the moment his knees had hit the pavement in an alley near Fifth Avenue, the rough hands that had taken his wallet, his phone, his briefcase containing the contract drafts. Now he couldn't form the words to ask for help. When he tried to speak to the police officer, only garbled sounds emerged, a frightening jumble of English and Japanese that made no sense even to himself. His right arm hung uselessly at his side. Masato Ishida, a man whose signature could move billions, whose words could launch or sink companies, could not communicate a simple plea for help. A small trail of saliva escaped from the corner of his mouth. He felt the cold seeping deeper, reaching for his core. Hypothermia would claim him if the stroke didn't finish the job first. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. To die anonymously on a bench in Manhattan after spending decades building an empire. To disappear without fulfilling his final promise. Across the street, the warm golden light of the Cardinal restaurant spilled onto the wet pavement. Through the large windows, he could see people eating, laughing, living. Another world separated from him by more than just a street. The gap felt insurmountable now. Masato closed his eyes. A single hot tear escaped, mixing with the cold rain on his cheek. In his mind, he whispered an apology to a man who had been dead for 3 years. A promise that would remain unfulfilled. Yakusoku. The promise. As consciousness began to slip away, he didn't notice the young woman in the restaurant window watching him with unusual intensity. The Cardinal was a Manhattan institution, a high-end diner that had somehow survived the relentless evolution of the city's culinary scene. Inside, the air was thick with the aromas of sizzling steaks, fresh bread, and expensive perfume. The restaurant hummed with the controlled chaos of a busy Friday evening service, the clatter of silverware, and the murmur of conversations creating a soothing white noise. Rachel Warren moved through the chaos with the practiced efficiency of someone who had mastered the art of invisibility. At 28, she wore her exhaustion like an accessory, but it couldn't completely mask the intelligence in her hazel eyes or the quiet dignity in her posture. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform a crisp white shirt and black slacks under the restaurant's signature cardinal red apron. For 6 years, the Cardinal had been her world, a safe harbor in the storm that had been her life since her father's death. It paid the rent on her tiny Queens apartment and funded her evening linguistics classes. It was stable, predictable, unlike everything else. Rachel had a gift. Her father, James Warren, had called it her architect's eye. The ability to notice details others missed. The subtle tensions in posture that signaled a customer was ready for their check. The slight changes in expression that indicated whether a diner would welcome conversation or preferred solitude. The way people moved through spaces, claimed territories, established hierarchies without saying a word. Rachel was filling water glasses at table 12 when she first noticed the man on the bench across the street. Something about his stillness amid the frantic motion of Manhattan caught her eye. Through the rain-streaked window, she observed him for a moment, then returned to her duties. 3 times she passed the window. 3 times her eyes were drawn back to the solitary figure. The 3rd time she paused, water pitcher still in hand, and really looked. His suit was expensive, even soaked through. His posture was unusual, slumped but stiff on one side, and he wasn't moving to seek shelter despite the worsening downpour. Warren Table 7 needs their check, and 14 is still waiting for their dessert menus. Gordon Mercer, the floor manager, materialized beside her, his perpetually disapproving expression deepening the lines between his eyebrows. "What are you staring at?" "That man across the street," Rachel said, nodding toward the window. "I think something's wrong with him." Gordon gave the bench a cursory glance. "Just another drunk or homeless guy. Focus on your section, Warren. The Carmichaels at table 20 are big tippers, and they specifically requested you." He walked away, leaving the scent of too much cologne in his wake. Rachel had learned long ago which battles to fight with Gordon. This wasn't one of them. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling as she delivered desserts, refilled coffee cups, and processed payments. Something about the man on the bench tugged at her consciousness, demanding attention. Like a single wrong note in a familiar melody. The cherry blossom pin fastened to her apron caught the light as she leaned over to clear table 19. The small silver and enamel ornament had been her father's, one of the few possessions she'd kept after his death. He'd told her it was a gift from a Japanese friend, someone who would one day do great things. It was her talisman, her connection to him. Rachel glanced at her watch. 8:15 p.m., only 3 more hours in her shift. The rain hadn't let up. She approached the window again, water pitcher in hand, under the pretense of refilling glasses at table 5. The man still hadn't moved, but now his head was slumped forward, his body even more askew. Rachel made her decision in an instant. "Chelsea," she said to a fellow server, passing with a tray of drinks, "can you cover my section for 5 minutes? Bathroom emergency." Chelsea rolled her eyes but nodded. 5 minutes, Rachel, not a second more. I've got the Sullivan party coming in at 8:30. Rachel slipped her order pad into her apron pocket and headed toward the back of the restaurant. Instead of turning toward the restrooms, she ducked through the kitchen and out the service entrance into the alley. The rain hit her like a physical force, cold and relentless. She hadn't grabbed a coat, and her thin uniform shirt was soaked within seconds. Rachel hesitated for just a moment, then darted out of the alley and across the street, dodging taxis and an Uber, ignoring the angry honk of a delivery truck. Up close, the man looked worse than she'd feared. His skin had a grayish cast and his breathing was shallow and irregular. His right side seemed oddly rigid while his left hand trembled slightly. Classic signs of a stroke, Rachel realized, recalling the first aid course she'd taken after her father's death. "Sir," she said, touching his shoulder gently. "Sir, can you hear me? Do you need help?" His eyes flickered open, dark and confused. His mouth worked, but the sounds that emerged were garbled, unintelligible. Panic flashed across his face, a universal expression of fear that needed no translation. Rachel knelt before him, rain soaking through her slacks. "It's okay," she said, trying to project calm she didn't feel. "I'm going to help you. Can you understand me?" No response, just those dark eyes locked on hers, pleading. On impulse, Rachel tried the only Japanese phrase she knew with any confidence. "Daijoubu desu ka?" "Are you okay?" The change was immediate and profound. The man's eyes widened, a spark of recognition flaring in them. He struggled to speak, producing a single clear word amid the garbled sounds. "Yakusoku." Rachel didn't recognize the word, but the fact that he'd responded at all was encouraging. "I'm going to call an ambulance," she said, pulling out her phone. "Stay with me, sir." As she dialed 911, Rachel noticed something else. The man's gaze had fixed on the cherry blossom pin on her apron. His left hand, the one that still worked, reached toward it tremulously. 911, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice sounded tinny and distant against the rainfall. I need an ambulance at the corner of Lexington and 63rd. Rachel said, her voice steadier than she felt. Elderly male showing signs of a stroke. Unresponsive speech affected right side weakness. Is the victim conscious? Yes, but confused. Please hurry. He's been sitting in the rain and he's soaking wet. I think hypothermia might be setting in too. Ambulance is being dispatched. Estimated arrival time 8 minutes. Can you stay with the victim until they arrive? Yes, I'll stay with him. Rachel ended the call and turned her attention back to the man. She slipped off her apron and draped it over his shoulders, a pitiful shield against the rain, but better than nothing. Help is coming, she said, enunciating clearly. Just hang on, sir. The man's eyes remained fixed on her cherry blossom pin. With visible effort, he raised his hand and touched his own lapel as if looking for something that should have been there. Rachel glanced at his expensive watch, noticing it had stopped. The Patek Philippe logo caught her eye. Even with her limited knowledge of luxury goods, she knew this was no ordinary timepiece. This was definitely no homeless person. Little Japan, the man suddenly said, the words clear and startling amid his otherwise garbled speech. James. Rachel stared at him, a chill that had nothing to do with the rain running down her spine. James was her father's name. Do you know James Warren? She asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. The man's eyes widened. He tried to speak again, but only unintelligible sounds emerged. His left hand gripped her wrist with surprising strength. Rachel was so focused on the man that she didn't notice Gordon until his voice cut through the rain. Warren, what the hell are you doing? He stood on the sidewalk, an umbrella in hand, his face twisted with anger. You can't just abandon your section in the middle of a shift. This man needs help, Gordon, Rachel said, not taking her eyes off the elderly Japanese man. I've called an ambulance. He's having a stroke. Gordon took a step closer, his expression shifting from anger to disgust. Jesus, Rachel, you can't just run off to help every stray dog you find. This isn't our problem. Get back inside before I call Mr. Renfield. I'm not leaving him alone, Rachel said, her voice taking on a steely quality that surprised even her. The ambulance will be here any minute. You can fire me tomorrow if you want. Gordon opened his mouth to argue further when a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and a well-dressed man in his 50s emerged holding an umbrella. He surveyed the scene with cold efficiency, his gaze moving from the elderly man to Rachel to Gordon. What's going on here? He demanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. Before anyone could answer, the wail of an approaching ambulance cut through the rain. Rachel felt a surge of relief, which quickly evaporated as the elderly man's grip on her wrist tightened painfully. His eyes suddenly clear and focus locked with hers. With visible effort, he formed two words, not Hammond. The well-dressed man stepped forward. Masato, my God, what happened to him? Rachel stood her ground as the ambulance pulled up. He's having a stroke. Are you a relative? Victor Hammond, Chief Operating Officer of Tech Summit Global, the man said with practiced smoothness. Masato Ishida is our CEO. I've been looking for him for hours. He turned to Gordon. Thank you for your assistance. The company will make a generous donation to your establishment. Gordon practically preened. The Cardinal is always happy to help, Mr. Hammond. I'm the floor manager, Gordon Mercer. The ambulance doors opened, and two paramedics emerged with a stretcher. Rachel finally recognized the name Hammond had dropped so casually. Masato Ishida, the Japanese technology mogul who had been in the news that morning. Tech Summit was announcing a major new development in Manhattan. As the paramedics approached, Rachel felt torn. The man Masato had warned her about Hammond, but she had no context for that warning. She couldn't just walk away now. Something was very wrong here. I found him, Rachel said firmly as the paramedics began their assessment. I'm coming in the ambulance. Hammond raised an eyebrow. That's hardly necessary, miss. Warren, Rachel Warren. She held his gaze. I speak a little Japanese and he's been responding to it. That might help the doctors. The lead paramedic, a burly man with a tag reading Andrews, looked up from taking Masato's vitals. BP's dropping. Definite CVA signs. We need to move now. He glanced at Rachel. You family? No, but then sorry, no ride-alongs. We're taking him to Lenox Hill. You can meet us there if you want. Rachel watched helplessly as they transferred Masato to the stretcher. As they lifted him, something fell from his pocket, a small leather wallet. Rachel picked it up quickly, intending to hand it to the paramedics. "I'll take that," Hammond said, his hand outstretched. Something in his tone made Rachel hesitate. She remembered Masato's warning and the way he'd reacted to her cherry blossom pin. "I'll make sure the hospital gets it," she said, slipping it into her pocket before Hammond could insist. The paramedics were already loading Masato into the ambulance. Hammond's expression darkened momentarily, then smoothed into professional concern. "I'll follow in my car," he said. "Thank you for your help, Miss Warren. I'm sure Mr. Ishida would be grateful." As the ambulance pulled away, its siren cutting through the night, Rachel stood in the rain, acutely aware of Gordon's glare and Hammond's calculating gaze. "Warren, you're fired," Gordon said flatly. "Clear out your locker tonight." Rachel barely heard him. She was too focused on the small, elegant wallet in her pocket and the single word Masato had spoken so clearly. Yakusoku. Little did she know that this word, this promise, would change everything. Lenox Hill Hospital buzzed with the controlled urgency of a Friday night shift. Rachel arrived 20 minutes after the ambulance, her hair still dripping from the rain, her uniform damp beneath the light jacket she'd grabbed from her locker at the Cardinal. She clutched Masato's wallet in her pocket, still uncertain why she'd kept it from Hammond. At the emergency department desk, a harried receptionist barely glanced up from her computer. "Patient name Masato Ishida. He was just brought in by ambulance. Suspected stroke." The woman typed quickly. "Relation?" Rachel hesitated. "I found him. I'm the one who called the ambulance. So not family." The receptionist's tone made it clear this was a problem. "I'm sorry, but only family members are allowed information about patients." "Please," Rachel said, leaning closer. "I just need to know if he's okay, and I have his wallet." The receptionist's expression softened slightly. "You can leave the wallet with me. I'll make sure it gets to him." She paused, then added more quietly, "He's in trauma room 3. They're doing scans now. That's all I can tell you." "Thank you," Rachel said, but she made no move to hand over the wallet. Something still felt wrong about the situation. Hammond's arrival, Masato's warning. Rachel found a seat in the crowded waiting room, away from the main desk, but with a clear view of the emergency department doors. She pulled out Masato's wallet and carefully opened it. Inside was exactly what one would expect from a billionaire's wallet. Several platinum and black credit cards. A Tech Summit Global ID card with Masato's stern photograph. A New York driver's license. About $2,000 in crisp $100 bills. And tucked into a small compartment, a folded piece of paper. Rachel hesitated. This was an invasion of privacy. But Masato had warned her about Hammond had recognized her. Cherry Blossom Pin had mentioned her father's name. She needed answers. She carefully unfolded the paper. It was a small note written in an elegant hand. "Find James Warren, Manhattan, Yakusoku." Rachel's hands began to tremble. Her father's name written in the hand of a Japanese billionaire. And that word again, the one he'd struggled to say to her. Before she could process this, the emergency department doors swung open. Victor Hammond strode in, accompanied by a tall, severe-looking woman in a designer suit and two men who had the unmistakable bearing of security personnel. Rachel slipped the wallet back into her pocket and hunched over her phone, pretending to be absorbed in it as Hammond approached the reception desk. "Victor Hammond, COO of Tech Summit Global. I'm here about Masato Ishida." The receptionist's demeanor changed instantly. "Yes, Mr. Hammond. Mr. Ishida is being treated by Dr. Chen. She should be out shortly to update you. I need to speak with her immediately. This is a matter of international corporate security." The receptionist picked up her phone, intimidated by Hammond's tone. Rachel watched her unease growing. 5 minutes later, a petite Asian woman in a white coat emerged from the treatment area. "Mr. Hammond, I'm Dr. Eliza Chen, attending neurologist." Hammond stepped forward, the security personnel flanking him. "How is he?" "Mr. Ishida has suffered an ischemic stroke. We've administered TPA to break up the clot, and he's being taken for an MRI now to assess the damage. His condition is serious but stable." "When can he be moved?" Hammond asked. "We need to get him back to Japan as soon as possible." Dr. Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but Rachel caught the slight narrowing of her eyes. "Mr. Ishida won't be traveling anywhere for at least 72 hours, Mr. Hammond. Stroke recovery is delicate, and he needs close monitoring." "I understand, but surely arrangements can be made," Hammond pressed. "We have a private medical team standing by." I'm afraid that's not possible, Dr. Chen said firmly. Mr. Ishida is my patient, and I will not authorize his transfer until I deem it medically safe. Hammond's jaw tightened. I need to see him. Now. He's undergoing tests. You can see him when he's back in his room, perhaps in an hour. As Hammond reluctantly took a seat in the waiting area with his entourage, Rachel made a decision. She approached Dr. Chen as the doctor headed back toward the treatment area. Dr. Chen, may I speak with you for a moment in private? The doctor eyed her curiously. And you are Rachel Warren. I'm the one who found Mr. Ishida and called the ambulance. She lowered her voice. Please, it's important. Something in Rachel's tone must have conveyed her urgency. Dr. Chen nodded slightly. Follow me. She led Rachel to a small consultation room and closed the door. What's this about Miss Warren? Rachel pulled out Masato's wallet. He dropped this when they were putting him in the ambulance. I was going to give it to you, but then I found this. She showed Dr. Chen the note with her father's name. James Warren was my father, Rachel explained. He died 3 years ago. I have no idea why Mr. Ishida would have his name, but when I found him, he responded to Japanese, and he seemed fixated on this. She touched the cherry blossom pin on her jacket where she transferred it from her apron. Dr. Chen studied her thoughtfully. That's unusual. Did Mr. Ishida say anything to you? Just one word clearly, yakusoku, and he warned me about Mr. Hammond. Dr. Chen's expression changed subtly. Ms. Warren's stroke patients often experience confusion. What they say immediately after the event isn't always reliable. I understand that, but this can't be coincidence. My father's name in his wallet, his reaction to my pin. And Mr. Hammond seems very eager to get him out of the country. Dr. Chen was silent for a moment, her gaze assessing. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Ishida's stroke has affected his speech center. He's experiencing aphasia difficulty forming and understanding language. But interestingly, bilingual patients sometimes retain function in one language while losing it in another. So he might be able to communicate in Japanese, but not English, Rachel asked. It's possible, and it might explain why he responded to you. Dr. Chen hesitated, then made a decision. I'd like you to try speaking with him once he's back from his MRI. Your Japanese connection might help us assess his cognitive function. Rachel felt a surge of relief. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Don't thank me yet. The doctor's expression was serious. Mr. Hammond won't like it, and I'm stretching hospital protocol. But my priority is my patient, not corporate politics. Rachel's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She glanced down at it, then froze. Stay away from Ishida if you value your life. She quickly showed the message to Dr. Chen, whose eyes widened. That settles it, the doctor said firmly. Something isn't right here. Wait here while I check on Mr. Ishida's MRI. Then we'll figure out our next steps. As Dr. Chen left, Rachel sat alone in the consultation room, the threatening text message still displayed on her screen. She should be terrified. She should walk away. Instead, she found herself more determined than ever to understand the connection between Masato Ishida and her father. She thought about the cherry blossom pin her father had given her, telling her it came from a Japanese friend who would one day do great things. She'd always assumed it was one of his charming exaggerations and his way of making their simple life seem more connected to the wider world. Now she wondered if her father, the struggling architect whose dreams had died with him, had somehow known one of the most powerful men in the technology world. And if so, what was the yakusoku, the promise that connected them? Rachel waited, clutching the wallet with its mysterious note, as the storm continued to rage outside and unknown dangers gathered within. The truth, when it finally emerged, would change everything. Rachel waited in the small consultation room for what felt like hours, though her phone told her only 45 minutes had passed. The threatening text message glowed on her screen like a malevolent beacon. She had read it so many times that the words had lost their impact, becoming abstract symbols disconnected from their menacing intent. Outside, the storm continued its assault on Manhattan rain, lashing against the windows in rhythmic waves. The hospital hummed with the particular energy of a busy emergency department on a Friday night controlled chaos, urgent whispers, the occasional burst of activity as new patients arrived. The door opened and Dr. Chen stepped inside, her face carefully composed into a professional mask. But Rachel caught the tension around her eyes, the slight tightness in her jaw. Mr. Ishida is back from his MRI, Dr. Chen said, keeping her voice low. The results confirm an ischemic stroke affecting the left hemisphere, primarily impacting his speech center. The good news is that we administered TPA in time to minimize damage. With proper rehabilitation, he has excellent prospects for recovery. And the bad news? Rachel asked, sensing there was more. Dr. Chen glanced toward the door before answering. Mr. Hammond is insisting on seeing him immediately. He's brought paperwork claiming medical power of attorney for Mr. Ishida in the United States. Our legal department is reviewing it now. Rachel felt a surge of unease. Can he really take control of Mr. Ishida's care? If the paperwork is legitimate, yes. Dr. Chen's expression hardened slightly. But until our legal team confirms it, I remain Mr. Ishida's attending physician. And I believe it would benefit my patient to speak with someone who triggered a positive response in him immediately after his stroke. The implication was clear. This might be Rachel's only chance to speak with Masato. What about the security people with Hammond? Rachel asked. They can't enter the patient's room without authorization. Dr. Chen checked her watch. We have perhaps 15 minutes before legal makes a determination. Come with me. They moved swiftly through the corridors, taking a circuitous route that avoided the main waiting area where Hammond and his entourage would be stationed. Dr. Chen used her badge to access a service elevator, bringing them to the neurology floor without passing through the main lobbies. Room 712, Dr. Chen said as they approached a private room with a uniformed hospital security guard stationed outside. I've arranged for some privacy, but we don't have much time. The guard nodded at Dr. Chen and stepped aside. Rachel took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay beyond that door. The room was dimly lit, the rhythmic beeping of monitors providing a steady counterpoint to the rain against the windows. Masato Ishida lay propped up against white pillows, making his skin appear even more ashen by contrast. An IV delivered fluids and medication. A nasal cannula provided oxygen. Lids from a cardiac monitor traced the steady rhythm of his heart. Despite the medical paraphernalia, Masato retained an unmistakable dignity. His silver hair had been towel-dried and combed back from his forehead. His eyes, when they opened at the sound of their entrance, were alert and intelligent, though clouded with what might have been pain or frustration. Mr. Ishida, Dr. Chen said, approaching the bedside. How are you feeling? Masato's mouth worked, but only a few garbled sounds emerged. His expression registered frustration, his left hand clenching into a fist. This is Rachel Warren. Dr. Chen continued, gesturing toward Rachel. She's the one who found you and called for help. At the mention of Warren, Masato's eyes widened. He looked at Rachel with new intensity, his gaze dropping to her jacket where the cherry blossom pin gleamed under the hospital lights. Rachel stepped forward, her heart pounding. Konnichiwa Ishida-san, she said using the little Japanese she knew. Watashi wa Rachel Warren desu. I am Rachel Warren. The change in Masato was immediate and profound. His entire body seemed to relax, his eyes brightening with something like hope. Warren, he managed to say the syllables thick and slurred but unmistakable. James. Hi, Rachel said, nodding. James Warren no musume desu. I am James Warren's daughter. Masato struggled to sit up, his left hand reaching toward her. Rachel moved closer, unsure what he wanted. He pointed insistently at her pin, then touched his own chest where a similar pin might have been. Sakura, he said, one of the few clear words he could manage. Cherry blossom. Rachel unclipped the pin from her jacket and held it out for him to see clearly. My father gave this to me. He said it was from a Japanese friend who would one day do great things. Masato nodded vigorously, his expression urgent. He made a writing motion with his left hand. He wants to write, Dr. Chen said quickly, providing a pad and pen from the bedside table. Masato's hand trembled as he took the pen, but with visible concentration, he managed to write several Japanese characters. He thrust the pad toward Rachel, his eyes imploring. I'm sorry, Rachel said, feeling helpless. I can't read Japanese. Just a few words. Masato's frustration was palpable. He took the pad back and with painful slowness wrote in shaky English, Danger, Hammond Steel Project, Find Files, James' apartment. Rachel stared at the message, a chill running through her. My father's apartment. But it's been empty since he died. All his things are in storage or at my place. Masato shook his head vehemently and wrote again, Secret place, floor, blueprints. Before Rachel could ask for clarification, Dr. Chen's phone buzzes. She checked it, her expression grave. Legal has verified Hammond's paperwork. He's on his way up with security now. We have maybe 2 minutes. Masato became agitated, gripping Rachel's wrist with surprising strength. He wrote one final message. Trust no one. Yakusoku il promise. I promise James. Rachel nodded, her mind racing. I understand. I'll find what you're looking for. A commotion in the hallway signaled Hammond's arrival. Dr. Chen moved toward the door. Ms. Warren, we should go now. But Masato wouldn't release Rachel's wrist. With tremendous effort, he formed his most coherent sentence yet. Don't trust Hammond. He will destroy James's legacy. The door swung open. Victor Hammond stood in the threshold, flanked by his security personnel and a nervous-looking hospital administrator. His gaze moved from Masato to Rachel, his expression darkening. What is she doing here? He demanded. This woman has no authorization to be with Mr. Ishida. Dr. Chen stepped forward, professional composure intact. Ms. Warren was assisting me in assessing Mr. Ishida's language capabilities. As I mentioned, bilingual stroke patients sometimes... That's enough, doctor, Hammond cut her off. Your services are no longer required for Mr. Ishida's care. Tech Summit Global is transferring him to a private medical facility immediately. That would be against medical advice, Dr. Chen said firmly. Mr. Ishida needs at least 72 hours of observation before so. Your concerns have been noted, the hospital administrator interjected nervously. But Mr. Hammond has provided the necessary legal documentation. The transfer has been approved. Rachel felt Masato's grip tighten on her wrist. His eyes, now wide with something like fear, bored into hers. Ms. Warren was just leaving, Dr. Chen said, smoothly, moving to Rachel's side. As was I. We'll need to complete Mr. Ishida's chart before transfer. Hammond's security personnel moved into the room, positioning themselves on either side of Masato's bed. In a clear message, the conversation was over. Rachel gently disengaged her wrist from Masato's grip, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze as she did so. Rest well, Ishida-san, she said quietly. I understand about the promise. As Dr. Chen led her from the room, Rachel felt Hammond's cold gaze following her. In the hallway, Dr. Chen pulled her quickly toward the service elevator. Whatever you're involved in, it's bigger than you realize, the doctor said urgently. Hammond just presented paperwork signed by Tech Summit's board of directors authorizing him to take complete control of Ishida's medical decisions. That kind of document takes days to prepare, not hours. The implication hit Rachel like a physical blow. They were expecting something to happen to him. I can't say that definitively, Dr. Chen said carefully, but the timing is suspicious, and Hammond is moving with remarkable efficiency for someone who should be in shock over his CEO's condition. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. As the doors closed, Dr. Chen handed Rachel a business card. My private number is on the back. Call me if you need medical information or if Mr. Ishida manages to contact you. I don't know what's happening, but I don't like how my patient is being treated. When they reached the ground floor, Dr. Chen held the elevator door. Whatever you're planning to do, be careful. Men like Hammond don't make idle threats. Rachel nodded, thinking of the text message still on her phone. Thank you for everything, Dr. Chen. I haven't done anything, the doctor replied with a tight smile. And this conversation never happened. As Rachel exited the hospital into the still pouring rain, she felt simultaneously exposed and invisible. The streets of Manhattan at night offered both danger and anonymity in equal measure. She hailed a taxi, giving the driver an address several blocks from her actual destination. Whatever secrets lay in her father's old apartment, she couldn't risk leading Hammond's people directly to them. The rain had finally slackened to a persistent drizzle by the time Rachel reached her father's old building in the West Village. The 5-story brownstone had seen better days, its facade showing the inevitable wear of Manhattan weather and neglect. James Warren had lived in apartment 3B for 20 years, holding on to it, even when financial troubles would have made selling the logical choice. It's where the light is best, he'd always said. An architect needs good light. After his death, Rachel had been unable to afford the rent, even with the modest insurance payout. She kept his most personal belongings, donated many of his clothes and books, and put his architectural materials and models into a small storage unit in Queens. The apartment had been rented to a young couple almost immediately. Rachel stood across the street, sheltered under the awning of a closed cafe, considering her options. It was nearly midnight now. The building's security was minimal, a simple intercom system and front door lock that hadn't been updated in decades. Rachel still had her key to the building's main entrance. She'd never returned it after moving out. But getting into apartment 3B would be another matter entirely. She had no idea who lived there now, whether they were home, or how she would explain herself if confronted. As she debated her next move, her phone buzzed with a text message. Expecting another threat, she was surprised to see Dr. Chen's name. Hammond has expedited approval for air transport. Private medical jet preparing at Teterboro. Moving Ashita within 2 hours. They were taking him out of the country. Rachel's window of opportunity was closing fast. She needed to find whatever was hidden in her father's apartment now. Taking a deep breath, she crossed the street and used her key to enter the building. The familiar smell, a mixture of old wood radiator heat and the Indian food that perpetually wafted from 2A, hit her with unexpected force. For a moment, she was transported back to her childhood visits, her father's booming laugh echoing down these same hallways. Rachel took the stairs to avoid the ancient elevator with its telltale creaking. On the third floor, she paused, listening for any sounds from 3B. Silence. She approached the door, noting the new nameplate, T and Rossi. She had no plan for getting inside, no story prepared. But as she stood there, hand raised to knock, she noticed something odd. The door was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness visible between door and frame. Rachel's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. She pushed gently and the door swung inward with a soft creak. "Hello," she called softly. "Mr. or Mrs. Rossi. Your door was open." No response. The apartment lay in darkness, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the windows. Rachel fumbled for the light switch beside the door, flipping it on. The sight that greeted her sent ice through her veins. The apartment had been ransacked. Furniture, overturned cushions, slashed bookshelves, emptied. What had once been her father's serene, organized space was now chaos. But the destruction wasn't random. It had purpose. Someone had been searching for something. Hammond's people had beaten her here. Rachel stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She moved cautiously through the wreckage, noting that despite the thoroughness of the search, it had been conducted with a certain precision. Electronics remained untouched. Valuable artwork still hung on the walls. This wasn't a robbery. She made her way to what had once been her father's study, the room he'd used as a home office for his architectural work. The current tenants had repurposed it as a dining room, but the bones of the space remained the same. The large windows that had provided her father's precious natural light. The built-in shelves where he'd kept his reference books and models. The hardwood floor where he'd spilled coffee countless times. Masato's message echoed in her mind. Secret place, floor, blueprints. Rachel knelt, running her hands over the oak planks. Her father had always been meticulous about maintaining the original details of the pre-war apartment. He'd refinished the floors himself, spending weeks sanding and staining to get the perfect patina. Near the window where his drafting table had stood, Rachel's fingers detected a subtle difference in one board. Almost imperceptible, but there a slight gap at one end, a board that didn't quite sit flush with its neighbors. Heart pounding, where Rachel pressed on one end of the board. Nothing happened. She tried the other end, applying steady pressure. With a soft click, the opposite end rose slightly. Rachel slid her fingers under the edge and lifted. The board came up easily, revealing a narrow cavity beneath the floor. Inside lay a cylindrical metal tube, the kind architects used to protect important blueprints. Beside it was a small external hard drive and a sealed envelope with a single word written in her father's distinctive handwriting, Yakusoku. Rachel's hands trembled as she lifted the items from their hiding place. After 3 years, she was holding pieces of her father she'd never known existed, secrets he'd taken to his grave or thought he had. A noise from the apartment's entryway froze her in place. Footsteps. Someone had entered. Multiple someones from the sound of it. Rachel quickly replaced the floorboard, clutching the retrieved items to her chest. She looked around desperately for an escape route. The fire escape outside the window was her only option. Moving as quietly as possible, she unlatched the window and eased it open. "Check the bedroom first," a male voice said from the hallway. "Then the study. Be thorough." Rachel slipped out onto the fire escape, the cold metal grating pressing into her knees as she carefully pulled the window closed behind her. The cylindrical tube and hard drive made awkward bulges under her jacket, but she had no other way to carry them. She began her descent, trying to move silently despite the ancient iron structure's tendency to creak and groan. 3 floors up meant 2 flights down to street level. Rachel had made it halfway down the first flight when the window above her opened. A beam of light cut through the darkness, a flashlight sweeping the fire escape. Rachel pressed herself against the brick wall, hardly daring to breathe. The light passed over her once, then returned, fixing on her huddled form. "Got something on the fire escape," a voice called. "Looks like a woman." Rachel abandoned stealth for speed. She clambered down the remaining stairs as quickly as she could, hearing the window open wider as someone began to follow. At the bottom of the fire escape, she leaped the last few feet to the alley below, landing awkwardly. Pain shot through her ankle, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She ran limping slightly toward the street. Behind her, she could hear the pursuit-heavy footfalls on the metal stairs, a shout as someone radioed her position. Rachel emerged onto the street, which was mercifully still active, even at this late hour. A group of bargoers provided momentary cover as she melded into their midst, then broke away towards 7th Avenue, where she might find a taxi. She risked a glance backward and saw 2 men in dark clothing emerging from the alley, scanning the street. One spoke into a radio while the other began moving in her direction. Rachel ducked into a 24-hour bodega, nodding to the bored clerk as she made her way to the back. She needed a moment to think, to catch her breath, to examine what she'd found. In the relative privacy of the store's back corner, Rachel carefully opened the blueprint tube. Inside was a set of architectural drawings meticulously rendered in her father's distinctive style. She unrolled them just enough to see the title block: Tech Summit Global Headquarters, Manhattan, James Warren, Principal Architect. Rachel stared at the plans in disbelief. Her father, the perpetually struggling architect, whose career had been a series of small commissions and unfulfilled potential, had designed a headquarters for one of the world's largest technology companies. She carefully returned the plans to their tube, then examined the external hard drive. It was password protected. She knew that without even connecting it. Her father had been paranoid about digital security, a quirk she'd found amusing in a man who could barely operate his smartphone. The envelope remained. Rachel opened it with trembling fingers, finding a single sheet of paper inside. A letter dated 3 years before his death. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me before I could tell you the truth. The truth about my greatest work and my greatest friend. 40 years ago, I met a young Japanese engineer named Masato Ishida. He was brilliant but penniless, facing discrimination and hardship in America that wasn't kind to Asian immigrants. I gave him shelter in this very apartment when he had nowhere to go. We became brothers in all but blood. Masato returned to Japan and built what would become Tech Summit Global. I remained in New York pursuing my modest career. We stayed in touch over the decades, and Masato never forgot our friendship. 5 years ago, he asked me to design Tech Summit's new American headquarters in Manhattan. It was to be my masterwork, incorporating sustainable energy systems I'd been developing theoretically for years. Masato promised that when Tech Summit reached a valuation of $10 billion, he would build my design. But someone within the company has been working against us. My energy systems are valuable, too valuable. I've documented everything on the enclosed drive. The password is the date we met, followed by the Japanese word for promise. If anything happens to me, find Masato. Show him this letter. He made a promise to me under the cherry trees in Kyoto, and I know he will honor it. All my love, Dad." Rachel lowered the letter, her vision blurring with tears. Her father's voice seemed to fill the small bodega, as real and present as if he were standing beside her. The pieces were falling into place. Her father's mysterious death ruled a suicide after his final project fell through. The cherry blossom pin. Masato's desperate attempts to communicate with her despite his stroke. A dark figure passed by the bodega window, peering inside. One of Hammond's men. Rachel shrank back into the shadows of the store, mind racing. She needed a safe place to review the hard drive's contents. She needed allies. Most of all, she needed to understand what was on those blueprints that made them worth threatening her life. Rachel's phone buzzed with another text from Dr. Chen. "Ishida being prepared for transport now. Something strange happening. Security increased. Hammond arguing with someone on phone. Be careful." As Rachel stared at the message, another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. "I know who you are, Rachel Warren. I know what you found. Meet me at the southeast corner of Bryant Park in 30 minutes if you want to help Masato Ishida. Come alone." Rachel's first instinct was to ignore the message. It could be a trap. but something in the wording gave her pause. Not a threat, but an offer of help. And she was rapidly running out of options. Decision made, she tucked the letter back into its envelope and secured all three items inside her jacket. She'd need to lose her pursuers before heading to Bryant Park. And she'd need to be prepared for whatever or whoever awaited her there. As she moved toward the bodega's front door, prepared to slip back into the rainy Manhattan night, Rachel touched the cherry blossom pin on her jacket. Her father's voice seemed to whisper in her ear. Sometimes the greatest legacies are the ones nobody sees, Rachel. The foundations buried deep beneath the ground, unseen, but holding everything else aloft. She stepped out into the rain, determination hardening within her like concrete setting. Whatever her father and Masato Ishida had begun, she would finish. Whatever promise had been made beneath those cherry trees, she would ensure it was kept, even if it meant confronting the powerful man who seemed willing to eliminate anyone standing in his way. Bryant Park at 1 in the morning was an eerie landscape of shadows and silence, so different from its daytime incarnation as a bustling urban oasis. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a glistening sheen on every surface. Security lights cast long shadows across the empty pathways. The carousel stood motionless, its painted horses frozen in eternal gallop. Rachel approached the southeast corner, cautiously staying close to the perimeter where the streetlights provided some illumination. She had taken a circuitous route to the park, changing taxis twice and walking the final 10 blocks to ensure she wasn't followed. The hard drive, blueprint tube, and letter made awkward bulges under her jacket, but she refused to leave them anywhere. The corner was empty when she arrived. Rachel checked her watch. 1:05 a.m. She was late, but only by 5 minutes. Had her mysterious contact already come and gone? A figure detached itself from the darkness near the park's entrance, moving purposefully toward her. Rachel tensed, ready to run if necessary. As the figure drew closer, the light revealed a young Asian man in his mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit despite the late hour. His features carried a striking resemblance to Masato Ishida, though with sharper angles and none of the older man's weathering. "Rachel Warren," he asked, his accent a polished blend of Japanese and American education. Rachel nodded cautiously. "Who are you, Kapendi?" "Akira Ishida, Masato's son." He stopped a respectful distance away, hands visible at his sides in a deliberate display of non-aggression. "I apologize for the dramatic message, but time is critical, and I needed to speak with you away from Hammond's surveillance." "How did you get my number?" Rachel asked. "How did you know what I found?" "The hospital security cameras captured your conversation with my father. I had a contact pull the footage after learning of his condition." Akira's expression darkened. "As for your number, you left it with the hospital when you brought him in." Rachel studied him, searching for any signs of deception. "If you're really his son, why aren't you at the hospital?" "Hammond is having him airlifted back to Japan right now." "Because that's exactly what Hammond wants," Akira said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "To isolate my father from anyone who might interfere with his plans. I arrived from Tokyo 3 hours ago and was denied access to my own father, told that all decisions were being handled by the company's COO per the board's instructions." "And you suspect that's not true?" "I know it's not true. The board meeting Hammond cites was conducted without proper notification to all members. My father may be the CEO, but I am Tech Summit's Chief Technology Officer and a board member myself. I was deliberately excluded." Rachel's wariness began to give way to cautious hope. If Akira was telling the truth, she might finally have an ally who possessed both knowledge and resources. "What do you know about your father's connection to James Warren?" she asked, the true test of his legitimacy. Akira's expression softened slightly. "James Warren was the American architect who helped my father when he first came to this country long before I was born. They maintained a friendship for decades. My father commissioned him to design our new Manhattan headquarters." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My father visited him in New York 3 years ago after James's death. He returned to Tokyo deeply disturbed, convinced that his friend had not taken his own life as reported." The confirmation sent a surge of emotion through Rachel. Her suspicions about her father's death, which she'd buried beneath grief and practicality, resurfaced with renewed force. "Hammond was searching my father's old apartment tonight," she said. "His men nearly caught me there." Akira nodded grimly. "They're looking for the same things you found." "May I see them?" Rachel hesitated. Trust came neither quickly nor easily to her, especially not after the events of the past few hours. But Akira's knowledge of her father's relationship with Masato lent credibility to his claims. Not here, she decided. It's too exposed. Is there somewhere secure we can go? My hotel suite at the Four Seasons. I have private security that I trust implicitly. Hammond doesn't know I'm in New York, yet I used a corporate jet not associated with Tech Summit. The mention of the luxury hotel reminded Rachel of the vast disparity between their worlds. She was a waitress who had lost her job hours ago, standing in a rainy park at 1 in the morning with the son of a billionaire. As if reading her thoughts, Akira added, Ms. Warren, I understand your caution, but we have a common enemy in Victor Hammond, and time is working against us. My father recognized you for a reason. The cherry blossom pin you wear, it's the twin to one my father has carried for 40 years. A symbol of a promise made beneath the sakura trees in Kyoto. Rachel touched the pin on her jacket, the physical link between her father's past and her present. Yakusoku, she said softly, the promise. Yes. Akira's eyes widened, slightly impressed. Hammond has spent 3 years maneuvering to prevent that promise from being fulfilled. My father came to New York specifically to announce the Manhattan headquarters project, the building your father designed. Hammond has been systematically undermining the project from within, claiming cost overruns, regulatory issues, anything to delay it. Why, what's so special about my father's design? That, Akira said with grim determination, is what we need to find out, before Hammond succeeds in silencing my father permanently. The implication hung in the damp night air between them. Rachel made her decision. Let's go to your hotel, but I'm keeping these with me. She patted the bulges under her jacket where the blueprint tube hard drive and letter were secured. Akira nodded, gesturing toward the street where a sleek black Maybach waited, engine running. I would expect nothing less. As they walked toward the car, Rachel's phone buzzed with a final text from Dr. Chen. Ishida refused transport. Medical crisis staged. Hammond furious. Something big happening. Stay safe. Rachel showed the message to Akira, whose face broke into the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. My father is many things, he said as they reached the car, but he has never been an easy man to control. It seems even a stroke cannot change that. As the luxury car slid silently into the Manhattan traffic, Rachel gazed out at the glittering city. Somewhere in the massive urban landscape, her father's greatest work lay hidden in the tube beneath her jacket. Somewhere, Victor Hammond was plotting his next move. And somewhere, Masato Ishida was fighting his own battle, both against the physical effects of his stroke and against the man who sought to destroy his friend's legacy. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. But the most dangerous revelations still lay ahead. The Four Seasons Hotel Presidential Suite occupied the entire top floor of the building, offering a commanding view of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows transformed the cityscape into living art, the countless lights forming constellations against the night sky. The opulence of the space, with its museum-quality art, custom furnishings, and private terrace, made Rachel acutely aware of how far she had traveled from her modest Queens apartment in just a few hours. 2 stone-faced security personnel stood discreetly by the private elevator. They nodded respectfully to Akira as he led Rachel into the main living area, a cavernous space anchored by a massive fireplace where real flames danced behind crystal glass. We can speak freely here, Akira said, loosening his tie. The suite is swept for listening devices hourly, and my security team controls all access points. Rachel removed her damp jacket, carefully extracting the items hidden beneath it. She placed the architectural tube hard drive and letter on the polished surface of a marble coffee table. Everything my father left behind, she said simply. Akira stared at the items with an expression Rachel couldn't quite decipher. Part reverence, part apprehension. May I? He asked, gesturing toward the letter. Rachel nodded, watching as he read her father's words, his face growing more serious with each line. This confirms what my father has suspected, Akira said when he finished. Victor Hammond has been working against both our families for years. The question is why these blueprints are so valuable to him. Rachel gently removed the architectural plans from their protective tube, unrolling them on the large table. Both she and Akira leaned forward, studying the intricate drawings that represented James Warren's masterwork. The design was breathtaking, a tower of glass and steel that seemed to twist organically as it rose with terraced gardens spiraling up its exterior. The structure appeared to defy gravity, yet the engineering specifications indicated exceptional stability. But what caught Akira's attention were the detailed schematics on the later pages. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, tracing a finger over the technical drawings. "Your father didn't just design a building, he created an entirely integrated energy system." Rachel looked where he indicated, seeing complex diagrams that meant little to her untrained eye. "What kind of system?" she asked. "Based on these schematics, it appears to be a self-sustaining energy generation and storage mechanism integrated directly into the building structure." Akira's voice took on a note of growing excitement. "The glass exterior isn't just aesthetic, it's comprised of transparent solar collection panels. The gardens aren't decorative, they're part of a sophisticated temperature regulation system. And this core here," he pointed to the center of the building, "appears to be an advanced geothermal exchange system." Rachel remembered her father working late into the night, surrounded by technical journals and experimental models during the last year of his life. He'd been secretive about the project, uncharacteristically tight-lipped even with her. "So the building would generate its own power?" she asked. Akira's expression was one of genuine amazement. "Not just generate it. Based on these calculations, it would produce a significant surplus while requiring zero external energy input. A completely self-contained system with net positive output." He looked up at Rachel, his eyes bright with realization. "Do you understand what this means? Your father designed a commercial skyscraper that would never draw from the power grid, one that could, in fact, contribute energy back to the surrounding infrastructure." The implications began to dawn on Rachel. "That would be worth billions," Akira finished. "The technology alone would revolutionize urban architecture worldwide. The patent rights would be incalculable," a familiar voice interjected. Rachel and Akira turned sharply toward the suite's entrance. Masato Ishida stood in the doorway, supported by Dr. Chen on one side and a distinguished older Japanese man on the other. His face was pale, a slight droop still visible on the right side, but his eyes were clear and determined. "Father." Akira rushed forward, helping guide Masato to a comfortable seat near the fireplace. "How did you, Dr. Chenhua?" Masato said, his speech slightly slurred but comprehensible. "Loyal friend. Called your private number when Hammond tried to force transfer." Dr. Chen nodded. Mr. Ishida experienced a second small event, a TIA or mini-stroke, that actually helped restore some of his speech function. It's unusual but not unheard of. I used the medical emergency to prevent the air transport. Then Mr. Tanaka arrived. She gestured to the elderly Japanese man who had accompanied them. "Hideo Tanaka," the man introduced himself with a slight bow. "Head of Mr. Ishida's personal security for 30 years. When Dr. Chen called Akira, he contacted me immediately. We extracted father from the hospital through a service entrance," Akira explained to Rachel. "Hammond believes he's being prepped for emergency surgery." "Not much time," Masato said, his words measured and deliberate, each one a victory against his condition. "Hammond has board meeting tomorrow. 9 a.m. We'll take my company." Rachel approached Masato, kneeling beside his chair. "Ishida-san, I've found what you sent me to look for." She touched the cherry blossom pin on her shirt. "My father's letter said you made a promise to him. Under cherry trees in Kyoto." Masato's eyes filled with emotion. With trembling fingers, he reached into his hospital gown pocket and withdrew an identical pin. 40 years ago," he said slowly, "when I had nothing, James gave everything." He paused, gathering strength for the most important part of his story. "I promised, when I succeeded, I would build his dream, his legacy." Rachel felt tears welling in her eyes. "The headquarters." Masato nodded. "Hammond discovered energy system plans. Tried to steal. When James refused, Hammond arranged project cancellation. Financial ruin. My father's final project falling through is what drove him to depression." Rachel said, the pieces finally connecting. "The official ruling was suicide, but you never believed that." "James would never abandon you," Masato said firmly. "Hammond made it look like suicide to get blueprints. But James hid them." A heavy silence fell over the room as the full weight of the accusation registered. Victor Hammond hadn't just stolen intellectual property. He'd engineered the financial destruction of James Warren, potentially driving him to his death, all to acquire the revolutionary energy system. "We need proof," Akira said finally. "Accusations this serious against a man as powerful as Hammond require irrefutable evidence." All eyes turned to the external hard drive still sitting on the table. "Father's letter mentioned a password," Rachel said. The date they met followed by the Japanese word for promise. Masato's eyes lit with recognition. March 15th, 1982. Yakusoku. Rachel connected the hard drive to a laptop Akira provided. When prompted for the password, she entered 0315198 Yakusoku. The drive unlocked, revealing dozens of folders meticulously organized in James Warren's methodical style. Rachel clicked through them, finding extensive documentation, emails, financial records, technical specifications, and most damning of all, audio recordings. She opened one file labeled Hammond Final Warning. James Warren's voice filled the suite, strong and resolute. "Victor, I'm recording this conversation as documentation. I will not sign over the patent rights to my energy systems separately from the building design. They are integrated technologies, not standalone components. Tech Summit contracted for the complete architectural package." Hammond's voice replied, cold and threatening. "Be reasonable, James. The building is just glass and steel. The energy system is the true innovation. Sign over the rights, and I'll make sure you receive proper compensation outside the original contract." "That would violate my agreement with Masato. The building and system are meant to be his legacy as much as mine, a symbol of our friendship and shared vision." "Ishida is a sentimental old fool. He doesn't understand the true value of what you've created. Do you realize what this technology would be worth on the open market, particularly to certain foreign interests who would pay handsomely for exclusive rights? Are you suggesting selling proprietary technology to competitors? That would be a betrayal of Tech Summit and illegal corporate espionage. I'm suggesting you think of your future James and your daughters. How is Rachel these days still waiting tables while studying the languages nobody speaks? Such a waste of potential. With the money I'm offering, you could set her up for life. Don't you dare bring my daughter into this. We're done here, Victor. I'm taking these concerns directly to Masato." "That would be unwise." Hammond's voice had turned silky with menace. "Accidents happen, James, particularly in construction, even to architects who never visit their sites." The recording ended, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Rachel sat frozen, her father's voice echoing in her mind. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. "Hammond never got the complete plans," Akira said, breaking the silence. "That's why he's been systematically undermining the headquarters project. Without James's complete specifications, they can't build the integrated system." "But he still wants it," Rachel added. "That's why his men were searching my father's apartment tonight. He's still looking for what I found." Masato struggled to his feet, waving away Tanaka's attempt to assist him. Through sheer force of will, he stood straight, his voice stronger than it had been since his stroke. "Tomorrow," he said clearly. "Board meeting. Hammond will move to have me declared incapacitated. Take control of company. Kill headquarters project permanently." "We need to stop him," Rachel said. "With this evidence we can," Akira agreed, "but only if father retains control long enough to present it to the board." Masato nodded grimly. "I must appear at meeting, show I am capable, then reveal Hammond's betrayal." Dr. Chen stepped forward. "As your physician, I must advise against this, Mr. Ishida. You've suffered a significant stroke followed by a TIA. Your condition requires rest and controlled rehabilitation." "No choice," Masato replied simply. "My friend's legacy at stake. My company. My honor." A charged silence filled the room. The stakes were clear. Masato would risk his health, possibly his life, to honor his promise to James Warren, to ensure that the revolutionary technology would benefit humanity rather than be sold to the highest bidder for private profit. Rachel moved to stand beside Masato, the cherry blossom pin gleaming on her shirt. "My father would do the same for you," she said quietly. "I'll help however I can." Akira joined them, his expression resolute. "We have 9 hours to prepare. Hammond believes father is incapacitated and that Rachel has been neutralized. We have the element of surprise, but we'll only get one chance." As they began formulating their plan, Rachel felt a strange sense of destiny. The architect's daughter, the billionaire, and his son united by a promise made under cherry trees 4 decades earlier. 3 lives shaped by a friendship that had transcended time distance and now even death. Outside the windows of the luxury suite, Manhattan glittered in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in that skyline of architectural wonders, a space waited for James Warren's final masterpiece. A building that would not just scrape the sky, but would help heal the planet beneath it. His legacy, their future, if they could survive the coming confrontation. Tech Summit Global's temporary New York headquarters occupied 10 floors of a gleaming midtown skyscraper. The boardroom on the 60th floor featured panoramic views of Manhattan, the same skyline that would eventually include the revolutionary tower designed by James Warren if Masato Ishida could prevent Victor Hammond from seizing control. It was 8:45 a.m. The board meeting would commence in 15 minutes. Rachel stood by the window in a small conference room 2 floors below, dressed in a charcoal suit borrowed from Dr. Chen that morning. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, the cherry blossom pin prominently displayed on her lapel. She looked every inch the professional, though her waitressing clothes from the previous day were stuffed in her bag, a reminder of how drastically her life had changed in less than 24 hours. Akira entered, his expression tense but controlled. Hammond has arrived with his legal team. He's already speaking with board members, laying groundwork for the vote. And your father, Bitano, still in the executive washroom with Dr. Pan, Chen, and Tanaka. The makeup artist has done an excellent job masking the visible effects of the stroke, but Akira hesitated. He's pushing himself beyond what's medically advisable. Rachel nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. Masato was risking everything, including his health, to honor his promise to her father. The evidence is ready, she asked. Yes, the recordings and documentation have been prepared for presentation. The hard part will be getting father into that boardroom before Hammond can call the vote. A knock at the door interrupted them. Tanaka entered, his usually impassive face showing signs of strain. Mr. Ishida is ready, he announced, but we have a problem. Hammond has stationed security personnel at all entrances to the boardroom with instructions to prevent Mr. Ishida from entering, claiming medical concerns for his well-being. He's attempting a coup, Akira said, anger flashing in his eyes. We need a distraction. Rachel's mind raced. I can provide one, she said suddenly. Hammond knows who I am now, but he doesn't know I'm here. If I approach the boardroom claiming to have information about the Warren blueprints, he'll be unable to ignore you, Akira finished, nodding slowly. But it's dangerous. Hammond has shown he's willing to go to extreme lengths. So am I, Rachel said firmly, for my father's legacy, for the promise. The plan came together quickly. Rachel would approach the boardroom first, creating a diversion that would allow Masato to enter through a secondary door with Akira and their evidence. Timing would be critical. At precisely 8:55 a.m., Rachel took the executive elevator to the 60th floor. She moved with practiced confidence through the corridor, her years of navigating busy restaurant floors serving her well as she threaded between groups of executives and assistants. The boardroom doors loomed ahead, flanked by 2 security guards in dark suits. Rachel approached directly, chin high. Excuse me, she said to the larger of the 2 men. I need to speak with Mr. Hammond immediately. I have information about the Warren architectural plans. The guard's expression remained impassive. The board meeting is about to begin. No interruptions. Tell him Rachel Warren is here, she insisted. He'll want to see me. The name registered. The guard touched his earpiece, murmuring something Rachel couldn't quite catch. After a moment, he nodded. Wait here, he instructed, opening the boardroom door just enough to slip inside. Through the briefly opened door, Rachel caught a glimpse of the scene within. 12 board members seated around a massive table. Hammond at the head, exuding confident authority. Various assistants and legal counsel lined the walls. No sign of Masato. The guard returned. Mr. Hammond will see you briefly before the meeting commences. You have 2 minutes. Rachel was escorted into the boardroom, feeling the weight of every gaze as she entered. Hammond studied his smile, not reaching his cold eyes. Ms. Warren, he said smoothly, this is an unexpected pleasure. I understood you were occupied with other matters last night. The veiled reference to his men pursuing her sent a chill down Rachel's spine, but she maintained her composure. I thought you might be interested in discussing my father's architectural plans and his integrated energy system. A flash of naked desire crossed Hammond's face before he could mask it. Indeed, perhaps we should speak privately after the board meeting. As you can see, we're about to begin a rather important session. Rachel glanced at the assembled board members. I believe what I have to say would interest everyone here. It concerns the future of Tech Summit Global and a technological breakthrough worth billions. Hammond's smile tightened. Miss Warren, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, this is hardly the appropriate forum for— Actually, a strong voice interrupted from the doorway. It is exactly the appropriate forum. Every head turned. Masato Ishida stood in the secondary entrance to the boardroom, supported by Akira. Though his face showed strain and his posture wasn't quite as straight as usual, his presence commanded immediate attention. Dr. Chen and Tanaka flanked him, carrying materials for the presentation. Masato, one of the board members, an elderly woman, half rose from her seat in surprise. We were told you were incapacitated, being airlifted back to Japan. As you can see, Masato said carefully, each word pronounced with deliberate precision, reports of my incapacitation have been greatly exaggerated. Hammond recovered quickly. Masato, this is most irregular. Your doctors advised complete rest after your episode. We were simply acting in your best interest by proceeding with the meeting in your absence. My doctors— Masato raised an eyebrow, gesturing to Dr. Chen. My actual physician is here. She can speak to my condition. Dr. Chen stepped forward professionally. Mr. Ishida has experienced a mild ischemic stroke affecting primarily his speech center. With proper therapy, which has already begun, he can expect a full or near full recovery. His cognitive functions remain entirely intact. There is no medical reason he cannot continue his duties as CEO with appropriate accommodations during his recovery period. Murmurs spread around the table. Hammond's expression darkened momentarily before he forced another smile. Wonderful news, of course. But the agenda for today's meeting includes complex financial matters requiring immediate decisions. Perhaps it would be best if I fulfilled my responsibilities as CEO, Masato finished firmly, beginning with exposing a conspiracy within Tech Summit that threatens not only our Manhattan headquarters project, but the company's very integrity. The room fell silent. Hammond's smile vanished completely. What is the meaning of this? Demanded one of the board members, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair. Masato moved to the head of the table, directly opposing Hammond. Victor Hammond has been systematically undermining the Manhattan headquarters project for 3 years, not because of costs or regulations, but because he intends to steal the revolutionary energy system designed by James Warren and sell it separately to foreign interests. Gasps and mutters erupted around the table. Hammond's face flushed with anger. These are outrageous accusations, he snapped. Masato is clearly not well. His stroke has affected his judgment. The evidence speaks for itself, Akira said calmly, distributing tablets to each board member. What you're receiving contains emails, financial records, and recorded conversations documenting Hammond's efforts to separate the energy system from the building design, his threats against James Warren, and his communications with competitors interested in acquiring the technology outside proper channels. As the board members began reviewing the materials, Rachel stepped forward. My father created the integrated energy system as part of his complete architectural vision for Tech Summit's headquarters. He refused to separate the components because the building itself is integral to the system's function. That's why it's so revolutionary. Hammond's composure cracked. This is absurd. You have no standing here, Ms. Warren. You're a waitress, not an architect or engineer. I am James Warren's daughter, Rachel replied, her voice steady, and the custodian of his final work. Work that you tried to steal, Mr. Hammond. Work that you may have killed him to obtain. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. One of the board members who had been listening to a recording looked up in shock. Is that Hammond threatening Warren on this recording? He demanded. It is, Akira confirmed, dated 3 weeks before James Warren's death. A death ruled a suicide, but under highly suspicious circumstances. Hammond's face had gone from flushed to ashen. He looked around the table, finding no allies in the shocked expressions of his colleagues. This is a coordinated attack on my character, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. These recordings could be fabricated. This entire scenario orchestrated by Masato and his son to prevent the necessary changes to company leadership during a medical crisis. Masato removed his own cherry blossom pin, placing it gently on the table beside Rachel's. James Warren saved my life 40 years ago, he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. When I had nothing, he gave me shelter, friendship, and dignity in a foreign land. I promised him that when I succeeded, I would build his masterpiece, a building that could change how cities function, how energy is generated and consumed, a building that could help heal our planet. He looked directly at Hammond. You tried to steal that vision, to break it apart for profit, to destroy my friend's legacy. And possibly my father himself, Rachel added quietly. The board chair, who had been silent until now, stood. I believe we've heard enough to warrant immediate action. Victor Hammond is suspended from all duties pending a full investigation. Security will escort him from the premises and ensure he has no further access to company systems or facilities. Hammond's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I built this company alongside Masato Ituen. You betrayed everything we built, Masato said, his voice sad rather than angry. For money, for power. He shook his head slowly. The tragedy is that, had you simply been patient, you would have shared in the success of James's innovation as a legitimate part of Tech Summit's future. As security personnel entered to remove Hammond, he made one last desperate attempt. The Warren design is flawed. The energy system won't function at full scale. You're betting billions on unproven technology. Akira smiled for the first time. Actually, we've been quietly testing scaled models based on the portions of the design we did have. The preliminary results exceed even James Warren's projections by 23%. The full implementation with the complete specifications we now possess will revolutionize urban architecture worldwide. Hammond's face crumpled as he finally understood the magnitude of what he'd lost. As he was escorted from the room, the fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving only the hollow shell of a man who had sacrificed honor for greed. When the doors closed behind him, Masato turned to Rachel, his eyes filled with emotion. Your father would be proud. His vision will be realized. Rachel felt tears threatening but held them back. This wasn't the place. What happens now? The board chair answered. We vote to proceed with the Manhattan headquarters project using James Warren's complete designs. And he added, looking to Masato, we discuss appropriate recognition of James's contribution to what may be the most significant architectural innovation of the century. Masato nodded, then surprised everyone by saying, I have proposal. Warren Foundation, $100 million, to support young architects with sustainable vision. Rachel stared at him in shock. A foundation in my father's name. Yes, Masato said simply, with you as executive director, if you accept. The room spun around Rachel. 24 hours ago, she had been a waitress with a linguistics degree living paycheck to paycheck. Now she was being offered leadership of a $100 million foundation bearing her father's name. I don't have the qualifications, she stammered. I don't have a business degree or... You have what matters most, Masato interrupted gently. Character, courage, connection to your father's vision. He smiled, the expression transforming his face despite the lingering effects of the stroke. Everything else can be learned. Rachel looked around the boardroom at the faces of some of the most powerful business leaders in the world and all waiting for her answer. She thought of her father, of his struggles and dreams of the revolution in sustainable architecture that his work would now spark. Yes, she said, her body clear and strong. I would be honored to continue my father's legacy. Masato's smile widened. Then it is settled. Yakusoku fulfilled. As the board meeting continued, formalizing decisions and planning next steps, Rachel stood at the window gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. Soon a new tower would rise among these buildings. A tower designed by her father, powered by his innovations, standing as a testament to a friendship that had transcended decades and overcome betrayal. A promise kept, a legacy secured, a future reimagined. Outside, the first cherry blossoms of spring were beginning to bloom across the city. 1 year later, the wind whipped across the construction site, carrying the sounds of machinery and workers' calls 60 floors above Manhattan. Rachel Warren stood at the edge of what would soon be the executive level of Tech Summit Global's new headquarters, the Warren Tower. Her auburn hair, longer now and streaked with subtle highlights, danced around her face as she gazed out at the cityscape stretching to the horizon. Impressive view, isn't it? Akira Ishida joined her at the edge, handing her a hard hat emblazoned with the Warren Foundation logo. The environmental impact reports came back yesterday. Even at partial completion, the building's energy systems are performing beyond specifications. Rachel smiled, adjusting the hard hat. Dad would have been thrilled. He always said architecture should heal, not harm. In the years since the confrontation with Hammond, Rachel's life had transformed completely. As executive director of the Warren Foundation, she had overseen the establishment of programs supporting sustainable architecture worldwide. She had assembled a team of experts to manage the foundation's finances and operations while she focused on its vision and mission. Her linguistic studies had proven unexpectedly valuable in the foundation's international outreach. Masato Ishida had made a remarkable recovery. Though he still walked with a slight limp and occasionally struggled to find words when tired, he had returned to active leadership of Tech Summit. His friendship with Rachel had deepened into a mentor relationship, filling a void left by her father's absence. "Have you heard the latest about Hammond?" Akira asked as they began their inspection tour of the construction site. "The SEC investigation is complete, I believe," Rachel replied. "Multiple counts of corporate espionage, attempted theft of intellectual property, wire fraud. He took a plea deal this morning, 15 years, no possibility of parole for at least 10. Akira's expression was somber rather than triumphant. A brilliant career ended in disgrace, all for greed. Rachel nodded, feeling a complex mixture of justice served and sadness for potential wasted. The investigation into her father's death had been reopened, but remained inconclusive. While circumstantial evidence pointed to Hammond's involvement, nothing definitive had been found to elevate the case to murder. The official ruling remained suicide, though Rachel and the Ishidas knew otherwise in their hearts. They continued their tour, inspecting the revolutionary energy systems being installed throughout the building's core. James Warren's designs had proved as even more visionary than initially thought. The integrated solar, geothermal, and kinetic energy capture systems would make the tower not only self-sufficient, but capable of providing clean energy to surrounding buildings. Patents from the technology held jointly by the Warren Foundation and Tech Summit Global had already generated hundreds of millions in licensing revenue, with proceeds funding further research into sustainable urban development. As the tour concluded, Rachel and Akira took the construction elevator to the very top of the structure, where the final floors were still being framed. The wind was stronger here, the city spread out beneath them like a living map. "Father wanted to meet us at the site today," Akira said as they stepped onto the temporary platform. "He has something to show us." Rachel spotted Masato standing near the northern edge of the platform, leaning slightly on a cane that had become more fashion statement than necessity. At 70, he remained an imposing figure, his silver hair whipping in the wind, his dark eyes still sharp with intelligence and purpose. "Rachel," he greeted her warmly. "Perfect timing." "The building is extraordinary, Masato," she said, embracing him briefly. "Everything my father envisioned and more." "James would be proud," Masato agreed, but not surprised. He always saw possibilities others missed. He turned toward the northern view. "That is why I asked you both to join me today, to see what comes next." Rachel and Akira followed his gaze. In the distance, several blocks away, another construction site was visible. "The Warren Institute for Sustainable Design," Masato announced, "adjacent to Columbia University, a research center, educational facility, an incubator for the next generation of architects and engineers focused on healing our planet through intelligent design." Rachel stared at him in shock. "You're building another Warren project." "The foundation is building it," Masato corrected with a smile. "With a significant donation from my personal holdings, separate from Tech Summit. The board approved it this morning." "But I don't remember approving," Rachel began, confusion evident in her voice. "It was meant to be a surprise," Akira explained. "The foundation board voted while you were in Tokyo last month consulting on the Osaka project." Rachel felt overwhelmed. The tower alone would have secured her father's legacy. Now an institute bearing his name would educate future generations, ensuring his vision continued to influence architecture for decades to come. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, emotion making her voice unsteady. Masato placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father changed my life with an act of kindness 40 years ago. He saw value in me when others saw only a struggling immigrant. Everything I built began with his generosity of spirit. He gestured to the rising tower around them. This building honors his genius. The Institute will honor his heart. The three stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the city. Below them, Manhattan pulsed with energy and life. Above, the clear blue sky promised unlimited possibility. "There is one more thing," Masato said, finally reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and handed it to Rachel. "This belongs to you now." Rachel opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay Masato's cherry blossom pin, the twin to her own nestled on dark velvet. "I have carried it for 40 years, Masato said softly, a reminder of a promise. That promise has now been fulfilled. The pin should return to the Warren family." Rachel closed her fingers around the small silver and enamel ornament, feeling its weight, physical and symbolic. Two pins representing a friendship that had spanned decades and ultimately transformed an industry. "I'll treasure it always," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. As they prepared to descend, Rachel took one last look at the spectacular view. Somewhere in that vast cityscape was the bench where she had found Masato a year ago, soaked by rain and erased by indifference. A billionaire rendered invisible by circumstance, saved by a simple act of seeing. Life could change in an instant. Fortunes could rise and fall. But some things endured beyond material wealth or professional achievement. Friendship, honor, promises kept. The true legacy worth preserving. Rachel touched the two cherry blossom pins now fastened to her jacket, one from her father and one from Masato. Different paths, different lives, connected by a bond stronger than time or distance. As they stepped into the elevator, she smiled. Sometimes the most important architectural work wasn't in buildings at all, but in the bridges built between people. Those were the structures that truly changed the world. The elevator began its descent, carrying them down from the heights, not to an ending, but to the beginning of what would come next. A legacy not just preserved, but living and growing, reaching toward the future. Just as James Warren would have wanted.